The wind didn't howl. It was too cold to howl. It was a solid thing, a white wall that moved at 40 miles an hour, carrying ice that didn't fall so much as it flew sideways. The world had shrunk to the head of Cole's horse and the 20 yards of blurred snow in front of it. Cole pulled his scarf down from his mouth, the wool stiff with his own frozen breath. He was checking the North Range drift fence, or what he could find of it. It was a fool's errand in this blizzard. But cattle were stupid, and a downed fence meant finding their frozen carcasses come spring. He'd already lost 2 steers to a frozen creek. He wouldn't lose more to a blizzard if he could help it. His horse, a tough dun named Boulder, snorted and stopped, shaking its head. "What is it, boy?" Cole muttered, his voice deadened by the snow. He leaned forward, squinting into the gray-white chaos. There was nothing, just snow, the gray skeletons of sagebrush, and the rising drifts. Boulder tossed his head again, refusing to move. Cole trusted the horse. The dun had better eyes and a better nose than he did. "Show me!" He let the reins go slack. The horse shifted, sidestepping 20 feet to the right, and stopped again. Cole looked down. At first, it was just a stain, a dark heap against the white. His first thought was a calf, born and frozen. Or maybe a sack, fallen from a wagon, though no wagon had business being out here. He swung his leg over, his boots sinking deep into the powder. He left the reins on the ground. Boulder wouldn't move. He took 3 steps. The shape was wrong. It wasn't a calf. It wasn't a sack. It was a person. He stopped, the ice stinging his face. He felt a different kind of cold now, one that started in his gut. He moved closer, his heart a dull, heavy hammer in his chest. It was a woman. She was curled on her side, half buried in a drift. Her clothes, what was left of them, were city clothes, thin cotton, ripped to shreds, offering no protection. A white chemise, torn from the shoulder, exposed a landscape of skin that was a terrible, mottled blue. Her hair, a pale brown, was matted with ice. She was barefoot. Her feet were black-blue. Alien things. He knelt, his own knee soaking through. He thought she was dead. No one could live in this, dressed in that, for more than 10 minutes. He reached out a gloved hand, meaning only to see if she was frozen solid. He touched her shoulder. Her eyes snapped open. They were wide, vacant with terror, the pupils huge. She made a sound, a dry rattle in her throat. Her lips were cracked and blue, caked with ice. She tried to pull away, to curl tighter, but her body could barely obey. Cole pulled his glove off. He put his bare, rough fingers against her neck. The skin was like ice, but beneath it, a flutter, a pulse, thready and weak as a dying bird. "Alive," he breathed, the word stolen by the wind. He moved to pull his coat off, his big wool-lined canvas coat. As he moved, she flinched, a violent full-body spasm that seemed to cost her everything. She tried to speak. He had to lean his ear down to her mouth, the smell of snow and freezing flesh rising from her. A whisper, so quiet, he almost missed it. "Please, don't leave me naked here. Not I'm cold, not help me, but don't leave me naked." The shame was the last thing left alive in her. That broke something in Cole. The hard shell he'd built around himself for 10 years cracked. He didn't say a word. He yanked his coat off, the wind hitting him like a fist, and wrapped it around her. She was impossibly light. He scooped her up, her head falling back, her frozen hair scraping his jaw. He carried her to the horse. Getting her onto Boulder was a misery. She couldn't help, a dead weight in his arms. He got her settled sideways, mounted up behind her, and pulled her back against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, trying to force his own warmth into the frozen block she'd become. "Yeah," he grunted, turning the horse. The cabin was a mile south. It felt like 100. The wind was at their backs now, but it didn't matter. The cold was absolute. The woman in his arms didn't move. She barely seemed to breathe. He kept one hand tucked inside the coat, pressed against her chest, just to feel the faint, stubborn beat of her heart. He lived far from town, far from the railroad line, far from everything. He'd come to Wyoming to be alone, to find a place so quiet it might, God willing, drown out the noise in his own head, the noise of cannon fire, of men screaming, of his own brother's last, wet breath. The cabin finally rose out of the storm, a dark smudge of pine logs and a thin column of smoke. He'd banked the fire, expecting to be back in an hour. He kicked the door open rather than fumbling with the latch. The single room was cold, but not freezing. The fire in the potbelly stove was down to red embers. He carried her straight to his cot and laid her down. She was still wrapped in his coat. She was shaking now, a deep, rattling tremor that shook the cot itself. "Fire," he said, mostly to himself. "Need fire." He turned his back to her. He didn't look at her. He went to the stove, grabbed kindling from the box, and began to build the fire up. He worked with an efficient, brutal speed. He didn't have time for delicacy. He used the poker, opened the flue, the tinder caught, the kindling flared. He added larger pieces of split pine. The stove began to roar, the iron ticking as it heated. Only then did he turn back. She hadn't moved. Her eyes were open, tracking him. They were the only part of her that seemed alive. He went to the small pantry, took down a tin of broth, and dumped it in a pot with a scoop of water from the bucket. He set it on the stove. He didn't ask her name. She didn't offer it. He approached the cot slowly. He kept his hands open, away from his body. "Need to get you warm. These clothes are wet." She just stared. I'll get you something dry. I'll turn around." He went to his trunk, pulled out the thickest wool shirt he owned and a pair of long winter underwear he hadn't worn in a year. He set them on the edge of the cot. "I'll be by the fire," he said, and he turned his back. He heard fumbling, weak, pathetic sounds. A long silence. Then, a quiet sob. He stood rigid, staring at the stove, listening to the wind and the fire and the awful, quiet sound of her trying to dress herself. He didn't turn. He didn't offer to help. The flinch she'd given him back on the prairie. The whisper. He knew that touching her would be a new kind of violence. "I'm done," she whispered. He turned. She was sitting on the edge of the cot, swallowed by his clothes. His coat was puddled around her waist. She was shaking so hard her teeth clicked. Her skin was still a pale, bluish gray, but the worst of the blue was fading from her lips. He poured the hot broth into a tin mug. He brought it to her. She looked at his hand, then at his face, then at the mug. She didn't take it. Her hands were curled into claws, frozen and useless. He knelt. "Here." He held the mug to her lips. She drank, a sip, then another. She choked, coughed, and drank again. He held it for her until it was empty. He set the mug down. He saw her left hand, curled on her lap. On her third finger, a plain gold band, a wedding ring. He looked at it. She saw him look. She jerked her hand, pulling it deep into the sleeve of the oversized shirt, hiding it, her eyes filled with a fresh, sudden terror. He stood up fast, backing away. "Just rest. I'll sit here." He pointed to the single straight-backed wooden chair by the stove. He dragged it to the far wall, as far from her cot as he could get in the small room. He sat down, leaned his head back against the cold logs, and pulled his hat down over his eyes. He left her the space. The afternoon died. The blizzard turned the windows black. The cabin was lit only by the red glow from the stove's grate. The temperature inside crept from cold to comfortable, then to warm. The woman, buried under his blankets and his coat, finally slipped into an exhausted, twitching sleep. Cole didn't sleep. He sat in the chair, listening. He was a man who had sought absolute silence, and now his cabin was filled with the sound of another person's breathing, and soon other sounds. She began to sob. It wasn't loud. It was the sound of someone who had learned to cry without making a noise. A hitching, broken gasp for air. A muffled, desperate sound, as if she were crying into a pillow. She was doing it in her sleep. Cole closed his eyes. He didn't go to her. He just sat and listened, his jaw tight. The sound unwound him. It pulled him from the Wyoming cold and threw him back 10 years. Back to the humid Tennessee spring of 1862. Back to Shiloh. He hadn't been a cowboy then. He'd been a boy, a farmhand from Ohio, marching with Grant. His younger brother, Elias, was beside him. Elias, who was only 17, who had lied about his age to follow Cole to the war. The noise, that was what he remembered. The constant, deafening roar of cannon, the shriek of shells, the pop-pop-pop of thousands of rifles. It wasn't a battle. It was the end of the world. They'd been trapped in the woods, in a thicket the men called the Hornet's Nest. The air was blue with smoke, thick with the screams of men and horses. He'd been loading his rifle, his hands slick with sweat and black powder. Elias had turned to him, his face pale, his eyes wide. He'd opened his mouth to say something. A Confederate shell had exploded in the tree above them, a rain of wood and iron. Cole had been thrown to the ground. When he looked up, Elias was gone, or not gone. He was there, on the ground, but he was torn open. He was trying to hold himself together, his hands scrabbling at his own stomach, a look of shocked, childlike confusion on his face. He'd made a sound, a wet, gasping sound. Not a scream. It was the sound of a life trying to stay where it belonged and failing. Cole had crawled to him. He'd put his hand on his brother's chest. "I'm here. Eli, I'm here." Elias had died. His eyes locked on Cole's. That terrible, quiet, gasping sound, the last noise he ever made. Cole sat in his chair, in his cabin. A decade later, the wind tore at the roof. The woman on his cot made that same sound, that broken, desperate gasp. He hadn't been able to save Elias. The guilt was a stone he'd carried west, a weight that had settled in his chest and never left. He had come here for the silence, to escape that sound. He put his hands over his face, his palms scraping the rough stubble on his cheeks. He hadn't escaped a thing. The long night passed. Cole dozed in the chair, his body aching with cold and old wounds. He woke when the light in the window turned from black to a pale, weak gray. The storm was letting up. She was awake. She was watching him. He stood up, his joints popping. He stretched, feeling the ache in his shoulders. He didn't look at her. He went to the stove, opened it, and added more wood. He filled the coffee pot with water and grounds. He could feel her eyes on him. He glanced over. She had pushed herself up against the wall. The blankets were pooled around her. He could see her face clearly now. She was young, maybe 20. Her hair was tangled and dry, and she was bruised. A dark, ugly purple stain ran from her jaw up to her cheek. Another, shaped like fingers, was visible on her throat, just above the collar of his shirt. When she moved her arm to pull the blanket higher, the sleeve fell back. He saw more bruises on her wrist, dark, round, cruel. He looked away, his stomach twisting. He hated this. He hated the noise, and he hated this. He poured 2 cups of coffee, black and bitter. He walked over, holding one out. She flinched when he got close, her shoulders hunching. He stopped, 3 feet away. "Coffee!" She stared at the mug, slowly, wincingly. She reached out. Her hand was swollen, her knuckles raw. She took the cup. Her hands shook, sloshing the hot liquid over the rim. He went back to the stove and drank his own. The silence stretched. "Damn it," he muttered, when a small ember popped from the grate and landed on his boot. She winced. The word, the sharp sound of his voice made her recoil, pressing herself so hard against the logs she might have been trying to push through them. Cole froze. He looked at her. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't even been angry. He'd just cursed. He saw the terror in her eyes, and he understood. It wasn't just him. It was any man's voice, raised in any way. He set his cup down, very gently. He raised his hands, palms out. "Easy," he said. His voice was low, quieter than he'd spoken in years. "You're safe here. I'm not. I won't." He didn't know how to finish. "I won't hurt you." The words felt stupid. The world had already hurt her. She watched him. She didn't look away. She was like a cornered animal, too weak to run, deciding if he was a threat. She watched his hands. She watched his eyes. He let her look. He stood still, breathing slow, trying to be as unthreatening as a 6-foot, 200-pound man could be. He wasn't a soft man. The war in the West had burned all the softness out of him. He was quiet, and he was hard, and he wanted to be left alone. But this was different. He could see the calculations in her eyes, and slowly, over a minute that lasted an hour, he saw the terror recede. It was replaced by a bottomless, aching weariness. She wasn't afraid of him. She was just afraid. She lowered her gaze to her cup. "My name," she said. Her voice was a dry croak, raw from the cold and from disuse. "It's Lily." He nodded. "Cole." She took a shaky sip of the coffee. She looked down into the black liquid. "Thank you," she whispered. "For the coffee?" She shook her head. She looked up, and her eyes were clear for the first time. They were a pale, washed-out blue. "For not—" she faltered, her face twisting with a shame so deep it made him want to look away. "For not looking at me like a whore." The word hung in the small cabin, ugly and sharp. Cole felt the anger rise in him again, cold and clean. Not at her, at whatever and whoever had taught her to expect that look. "I don't know what you are, ma'am," he said, his voice rough. "Except near frozen. Drink your coffee." He turned back to the fire. He gave her space again. That night, the storm returned, but it was weaker. Lily slept, but it was not a peaceful sleep. She thrashed on the cot, her hands gripping the blankets. Cole sat in his chair, half awake, listening. She began to moan. "No! Please, no!" He stayed put. It was a dream. Waking her might be worse. But then she cried out, a sharp, terrified sound. "Get your hands off! Get off!" He was on his feet, crossing the room before he was even fully awake. He stopped by the cot. She was fighting the blankets, her eyes squeezed shut. "Lily," he said, keeping his voice low. "Lily, you're dreaming." She didn't wake. It's not worth it," she sobbed. "Not worth the price. I'm not. Lily." He put his hand on her shoulder, his calloused, rough hand gripping her through the thick wool. Her eyes flew open. She screamed, a real scream, high and thin. She scrambled backward, hitting the wall, her hands coming up to cover her face. "Get away!" Cole dropped his hand as if her skin were hot iron. He backed up, his hands raised. "Easy, easy. It's Cole. You're in my cabin. You're safe." She panted, her eyes wild, staring at him. The firelight flickered across her face. She was seeing him. Not the dream. Him. The train," she stammered. "The hands, they said—" "It was a dream," he said, his voice flat, trying to ground her. "Just a dream. You're in Wyoming. You're safe." She lowered her hands, but she didn't stop shaking. She stared at the cabin wall, at the rough-hewn logs, as if seeing them for the first time. She pulled the blankets up to her chin. Cole backed away. I'll be right here." He went back to his chair. He didn't sleep again. He watched the fire, and he thought about the train. The railroad tracks were 5 miles north, and he thought about her words. Not worth the price? What price? The next morning, She was quiet. She ate the jerky and hardtack he offered, ate it like she was starving, but she didn't speak. He was mending a piece of tack, his hands busy. When he glanced at her, she was sitting on the cot, just staring at her hands. The ring was visible, that plain gold band. He'd seen it clearly when he gave her the coffee. It wasn't just plain. There was engraving on the inside edge. He'd only caught a glimpse, but he'd seen it. It was a proper ring. From a church, most likely. What God has joined. This was a wife, a bride, thrown from a train, in a blizzard, in torn clothes. He looked at the bruises on her face, at the way she flinched if he moved too fast. He thought about the engraving, and the man who must have put that ring on her finger. Lily didn't talk about the man. She didn't talk about the train. She just sat on the cot, holding herself together. A woman stripped of everything but her shame, hiding in a stranger's cabin while the wind tried to tear the world apart. The blizzard broke on the third day. It did not end, but rather fractured. The solid wall of white dissolving into fits of angry wind and sharp, driving snow. By the fourth day, the sun appeared, a weak, pale eye in a gray sky, revealing a world that had been erased and redrawn in white. The cabin was an island in a sea of snow. Cole dug a path to the woodpile, his movements stiff. He dug his way to the lean-to that served as a stable, his shoulders burning. Boulder was safe, if restless. He checked his snares. He came back with 2 rabbits, which he skinned with the same quiet efficiency he did everything else. Inside, Lily watched. She had moved from the cot to the chair by the stove. She was still swallowed by his clothes, her small, bruised hands wrapped around a tin mug of watered-down coffee. She said nothing. She just watched him. The silence was a third person in the room. It had weight. Cole, a man who had craved silence, now found it heavy, charged with her fear. He worked, trying to ignore it. He swept the floor. He oiled his rifle. He split more kindling. On the 5th day, she spoke. The water bucket is almost empty. Her voice was still a croak. Cole looked up from his saddle rigging. I'll fetch it. I can, she said. She stood up, a little unsteadily. I can help. He looked at her bare feet, still swollen and discolored, wrapped in rags he had given her. He looked at the deep snow outside. No, you cannot. She flinched at the flat refusal, and he cursed himself inwardly. He softened his voice. Your feet, the snow is deep. Stay by the fire. She sat back down, her face drawn. He saw the shame in her eyes again, the shame of being useless. He sighed, grabbed the bucket, and went out. When he came back, she was standing by the small table where he ate. She had found his sack of potatoes and his paring knife. She was peeling one, her movements clumsy, her bruised hands shaking. He said nothing. He hung the bucket and went back to his work. And so, a routine was born. It was a routine of small sounds. The scrape of her knife against a potato, the thump of his axe at the wood pile, the bubble of water in the pot. They did not talk, but they moved around each other. She began to cook, simple things, a thin stew from the rabbits. She baked a dense, heavy bread from his flour and lard. It was not good, but it was hot, and it was food. They ate sitting at the small table, not looking at each other, the sound of their spoons against the tin plates loud in the quiet. The snow began to melt. First, it was just a dripping from the eaves. Then, the south-facing window cleared, letting in a brighter, sharper light. The world outside turned to a gray slush. They would stand, sometimes, him by the door, her by the window, and just watch the slow, agonizing melt. It was the only change in their world. One evening, after they had eaten, Cole was cleaning his rifle, the pieces laid out on an oilcloth. Lily was staring into the fire, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. He paid for me, she said. Cole's hand stopped. He did not look up. He waited. My PA. He died in a mill accident, she said. her voice flat, as if reciting a story she had told herself 1,000 times. My ma, she was a servant, a laundress, for a rich family back in Boston. We had nothing. I had nothing. No schooling. No prospects. She traced a knot in the wooden table with her finger. This man, he wrote to the pastor. He was looking for a wife, a good, strong girl. He said to come west, to help him build a life. He sent money for the train passage. A lot of money. She laughed, a dry, bitter sound. My ma thought he was a prince, a gift from God. She cried when I left. She said I was saved. Cole slowly, quietly, began wiping down the rifle barrel. He kept his eyes on his work. He listened. I was not saved, she whispered. When I got off the train, there was no greeting. He was just there, a big man, older. He looked at me like he'd just bought a horse. She pulled her hands into her lap, hiding them in the folds of his shirt. He took me to his house. It was not a house. It was a shack, and he told me what I owed him, for the passage, for saving me. She stopped. Cole could hear her breathing. A little too fast. I said I was his wife, but that we should wait. Get to know one another. He hit me. She touched her cheek, the bruise that was now a sick, yellowish purple. He slapped me, and he said, you are what I paid for. You are mine. He owned me. Cole closed his eyes. He heard the pop of the cannon. He heard Elias gasp. He opened his eyes, forcing the memory down. He said nothing. He just listened. I fought him, she said, her voice dropping so low he had to strain to hear. I resisted. I locked the door. I put a chair. I don't know why. It just felt wrong, vile. He would get drunk. He'd wait outside the door, saying what he was going to do to me. It went on for weeks. I got so tired, so hungry. Then, one night, he came back. He was not alone. He had 2 other men with him. They broke the door. She was shaking now, her whole body, but she kept talking, the words pouring out, as if a dam had finally broken. They held me down. He tore my dress. He told me, he said if I would not be a wife, he'd send me back. He said he'd send me to a brothel in Cheyenne. Said that's where a whore like me belonged. And his friends, they laughed. They stripped me, she whispered, and the shame in her voice was so profound, so naked, it made Cole feel cold. They took my clothes, all of them, and they looked at me, and they said things, and my husband, he said I wasn't even worth the trouble, wasn't worth the price. Not worth the price, the words from her dream. He said he was sending me back. He dragged me out, in the cold, just in my chemise. He and his friends, they put me on a train, a freight train. It was moving slow. They knew a man. And then, in the dark, in the middle of nowhere, he pushed me. He pushed me out the door, into the snow. She stopped. The cabin was silent, save for the fire and the drip, drip, drip of the melting snow outside. I do not know where I am, she said, her voice hollow. I do not know what this place is. I just walked until I could not walk. And then you came. Cole finished wiping the barrel. He began to reassemble the rifle. His movements were slow, deliberate, steady. He did not offer comfort. He did not say, "It's all right." It was not all right. The words were lies. He slid the bolt into place. The click-clack of the metal was the only answer. He looked up. Her face was pale, streaked with tears she hadn't known she was crying. She was braced for his judgment, for his disgust, for him to look at her like she was what they said she was. I fought at Shiloh, Cole said, his voice a low rumble. Lily blinked, confused by the sudden change. What? In the war, he said, not looking at her, but at the rifle in his hands. My brother, Elias, he came with me. He was 17. He died. I held him while he died. He set the rifle down. I came out here 'cause the quiet was the only thing that made sense. I never stayed with a woman long enough to know her. Never long enough to love her. Always seemed too loud, too complicated. He looked at her, his gray eyes steady. Men are capable of awful things. Lily, war, and this, what they did to you. It was not your fault. It was not your shame. He stood up. It is theirs. He took his bedroll from the corner, put it down on the floor, near the stove, in his usual spot. He left her with the cot. He had given her his bed, his food, his clothes. Now, he had given her the only other thing he had, a piece of his own past. He was, in his own way, covering her. That night, the scream woke him from a dead sleep. It was not a moan or a sob. It was a raw, lung-bursting shriek of pure terror. No! Get off me! Don't touch me! Don't! Cole was on his feet, his hand grabbing the hunting knife from his belt before his eyes were even fully open. He crossed the cabin in 2 strides. Lily was fighting. She was thrashing on the cot, kicking the blankets, her arms flailing, striking the cabin wall. She was tangled in the sheets, trapped. Lily! He yelled, grabbing her shoulders. She screamed again, her eyes wide open but seeing nothing. She struck him, her fist connecting with his jaw, a weak, frantic blow. Get off! Lily, it is Cole! You are safe! Wake up! He shook her, hard. Her eyes focused. She saw him. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a terrible, shuddering panic. She gasped, hyperventilating, her body trembling so violently he thought she might break. Cole! She choked out, her hands flying to his shirt, gripping him. Cole, please, please, they were here, they were... No one is here, he said, his voice firm, trying to cut through the panic. It is just me. You are in the cabin. You are safe. It was a dream. It was not, she sobbed, her whole body collapsing against him. It was him and the train. Oh, God, the hands. I could feel their hands. She was crying, not quietly like before, but in great, tearing sobs that shook her frame. She was still gripping his shirt, her face buried in his chest. Cole stood there, frozen. He was a man who had not willingly touched another person in years, and now this woman was clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing on earth. Awkwardly, painfully, he raised a hand. He put it on her back, his large, calloused palm flat between her shaking shoulder blades. You are safe, he said again, his voice rough. I am here. You are safe. She just wept. He stood, holding her, listening to her grief, as he had listened to her story. He did not shush her. He did not tell her to stop. He just stood, a solid, unmoving presence in the dark, and let her cry. After a long time, the sobs quieted, the shaking eased. She was still holding his shirt, but her breathing was deeper. Please, she whispered, her voice muffled against his chest. Please, do not leave me, just for a little while. Do not go. He looked at the cot. He looked at the chair across the room. He looked at the woman trembling in his arms. He gently loosened her grip. Move over. She scrambled back on the cot, pulling her knees to her chest. Cole sat down on the edge of the bed. He did not get under the blankets. He just sat, his back to her, a solid wall between her and the dark room. I am here, he said. Get some sleep. He sat like that for hours. He listened as her breathing, still hitched with sobs, finally evened out and deepened. He sat, a sentinel in the dark, until he saw the first gray light touch the window. Only then, when he was sure she was deeply asleep, did he stand up and go to the stove to make the coffee. When she woke, the sun was up. The cabin was warm. Cole was outside, hewing at a stubborn log with his axe. She could hear the steady thwack, thwack, thwack. She sat up. His big wool coat, the one he had wrapped her in on the prairie, was folded at the end of the cot, where he'd left it after she'd dressed. She picked it up. It smelled of him, of pine smoke and horse and the cold outside air. It was the coat of a man who worked. She stood and dressed in the flannel shirt and wool trousers he had given her. They were clean. She had washed them in the meltwater bucket 2 days before. She looked at the coat. Then she walked to the door and opened it. The air was cold, but clean. The sound of the axe stopped. Cole turned, the axe in his hand. He was in his shirt sleeves, sweat dampening his back despite the cold. Lily walked over to him. She was holding his coat out. "Thank you," she said. He looked at the coat, then at her. She was so small in his borrowed clothes. Her face was still bruised, but her eyes were clear. There was a resolve in them he had not seen before. He took the coat from her. He looked at the flannel shirt she was wearing. It was too big, but it was warmer than her torn chemise. "Keep it," he said, nodding at the shirt. She started. "Keep it," he said again, his voice not unkind. It is better than what you had." He turned back to the log, but he did not swing the axe. He tossed the coat onto a nearby stump. She stood there for a moment. I will make breakfast." He nodded, not looking at her. "All right." She went inside. He waited until the door closed. Then he let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He picked up the axe and swung, splitting the log with a single, clean blow. The days that followed were different. The silence was still there, but it was no longer heavy. It was shared, a companionable quiet. They began to touch, but not in the way of a man and a woman. It was the casual, necessary touch of two people living in a small, confined space. He would pass her a log for the stove, his fingers brushing hers. She would hand him a plate, her arm brushing his shoulder. At first, both of them would flinch, a small, involuntary jerk, a pulling back. She, from the memory of violence, he, from a lifetime of solitude. But as the snow melted and the ground began to show in muddy patches, the flinching eased. One afternoon, he was nailing a loose board on the stable wall. She came out, holding a mug of coffee. "Cole," she said. He turned, the hammer in his hand. She held the mug out. He reached for it, and his hand, rough and dirty, covered hers on the tin. They both froze. It was just a touch, his hand on hers, warmth, roughness, his skin against hers. Lily looked down at his large, scarred hand covering her small, bruised one. She did not pull away. He did not pull away. He saw the gold ring, stark against her skin. He cleared his throat and slid his hand away, taking the mug. "Thank you." "You are welcome," she whispered, and hurried back inside. Cole watched her go. He drank the coffee. It was scalding hot. He felt something in his chest, a strange, tight feeling he had not felt since before the war. It felt like a thaw. He knew he was running low. Low on flour, low on salt, low on coffee. The town, such as it was a 6-hour ride east. He had put it off for as long as he could. He could not put it off any longer. "I have to go to town," he said that evening. "For supplies." Lily, who was mending one of his shirts, looked up. The needle stopped. "Town? I will be gone all day. Maybe longer, if the mud is bad." He did not like it. He did not like leaving her. But he had no choice. I will be all right," she said, but her voice was small. "You will," he said. "Bolt the door behind me. Do not open it, for anyone." "I will not. I have the rifle, but—" He looked at his hunting knife on the table. He picked it up. It was a big, heavy-bladed knife. He laid it on the table in front of her. "Keep this, just keep it close." She looked at the knife. Then she nodded and picked it up. He left before dawn. He saddled Boulder, tied his pack mule, and rode out, leaving her alone in the small cabin in the vast, empty wilderness. It was a mistake. The ride was a misery. The melt had turned the prairie into a sucking bog. The 6-hour ride took 8. The town was just a single muddy street with a general store, a saloon, and a livery. He got his supplies, his face set in its usual grim lines, ignoring the stares of the townsmen. He was the recluse from the hills. They left him alone. He loaded the mule, wanting only to get back. The ride home was worse. The sun was setting, turning the sky a bruised, angry red. He pushed Boulder harder than he should have. A knot of anxiety was tight in his gut. It was a feeling he didn't recognize. He realized, with a jolt, that it was worry. He was still a mile from the cabin when he saw the tracks. 3 riders. They had passed this way, heading north, toward his land. They were fresh, no more than a few hours old. He spurred Boulder, dragging the pack mule behind him. He galloped the last mile, his heart hammering against his ribs. He burst into the clearing. The cabin was dark, no smoke from the chimney. "Lily!" he roared, swinging off the horse before it even stopped. He ran to the door, his hand on the pistol at his hip. The door was barred. He slammed his fist on it. "Lily, it is Cole! Open the door!" Nothing. "Lily!" He put his shoulder to the door, ready to break it. He heard a faint scrape. The bar was being lifted. The door cracked open. He pushed it wide. The cabin was pitch black and cold. The fire was dead. "Lily?" "Here." The voice came from the darkest corner of the room, from the small, tight space between the potbelly stove and the wall. He saw her, a small, dark shape, crouched on the floor, her knees pulled to her chest. He lit the lantern, his hands shaking with a cold rage. The light flared, illuminating the room. She was huddled on the floor, his hunting knife gripped in her white-knuckled hand. She was trembling so hard her teeth were chattering. "What happened?" he demanded. "Men," she whispered, her eyes huge and dark, fixed on the door. "Riders. I heard them. Voices, men's voices. They stopped. Right out there." She pointed with the knife. "They were laughing. They were talking. I put out the fire. I hid. I thought they came for me." Cole looked around the cold, dark cabin. He looked at her, crouched in the corner like a terrified animal. The knife, her only defense. He had left her alone. He had left her unarmed, save for a blade, in a world where men like her husband existed. He looked at the door. He looked back at her. He thought of the town, only a day's ride away. He thought of the men who had been at the saloon, the way they had looked at him. He realized, with a certainty that settled in his bones like the winter cold, that the town was not a refuge. It was a threat. It was not far enough. It was not, he thought, nearly far enough. Cole rode back to town 2 days later. The anxiety that had knotted his gut when he found Lily huddled in the cold, dark cabin had hardened into a cold, clear anger. He had built his life on the principle of being left alone, of giving the world a wide berth so it would give him one in return. It was a simple contract, and it had worked. Until now. The world had thrown Lily at his feet, and in doing so, it had broken the contract. The tracks of the 3 riders proved that. His quiet, remote patch of land was no longer isolated. It was just a place the world had not bothered to look at yet. Now, it was looking. He left Lily with a barred door, his rifle, and a pile of cut wood. "Do not build a fire unless you must." He'd said, "No smoke." She had just nodded, her face pale, the hunting knife tucked into the rope belt she used to cinch his oversized trousers. The sight of her, so small and so terrified, yet so determined, fueled the cold fire in him all the way to town. The general store was empty save for the clerk, a thin, sallow man named Silas, who was sorting beans. Silas looked up when Cole entered, his eyes registering mild surprise. Cole rarely came to town twice in 1 week. Cole didn't waste time. He bought a small bag of coffee beans he didn't need and a box of cartridges he did. He set the items on the counter. The silence stretched as Silas weighed the coffee. "Heard some men rode out your way," Cole said, his voice casual. Silas stopped, his hand hovering over the scale. He looked up at Cole, his gaze sharp, assessing. "That's so. Can't imagine what they'd want. Nothing out there but you and the wind." "3 riders, headed north from here," Cole said, his voice flat. He was not asking a question. Silas went back to his beans, his movements a little too deliberate. "Town's got visitors. Not my business to ask after folks. Cole, you know that." "This visitor, he asking questions?" Cole pushed the cartridges across the counter. Silas sighed. He leaned on the counter, his voice dropping. "Look, Cole, I like my quiet, same as you, but a man came in 2 days ago, well-dressed, from back east, flashing a thick wallet." Cole's body went still. "He's staying at the saloon's boarding room," Silas continued, his voice barely a whisper. "Asking questions. Put up a notice." "What notice?" "About his wife. Says she's unsound. Not right in the head. Says she run off. Stole some things. He's offering a reward." Silas wouldn't meet his eye. "He's looking for a runaway bride, Cole, and he's got 2 hard men with him, helping him look." Cole's blood ran cold. Unsound. A thief. The man was painting her as a criminal, a lunatic. It was smart. It was cruel. It meant the law. What little of it existed out here would be on his side. "Thanks, Silas," Cole said. He paid for his goods, his face a mask. "Cole," Silas said as he was walking out. This ain't your trouble, is it?" Cole paused at the door, the small bell jangling. "Just don't like strangers poking around my fences." He stepped out into the muddy street and rode home, the man's words echoing with every hoofbeat. Runaway bride. He found Lily not in the cabin, but in the lean-to, brushing boulder. The horse, usually grumpy, had his head lowered, letting her stroke his muzzle. It was a picture of such strange, quiet domesticity that it stopped Cole in his tracks. She turned, startled. "You are back." "They are looking for a runaway bride," he said. He did not know how to be gentle with bad news. She dropped the brush. Her face, which had gained a small amount of color in the past weeks, went as white as the snow on the high peaks. "He is here." "In town," Cole said, nodding. "With 2 men, he's telling folks you're sick in the head, that you stole from him." She sagged against the horse. He will not stop. He will not. Oh, God, Cole, I have to go." "Go where?" he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Into the wilderness. With no food, no horse? You'd be dead in 2 days. You know that." "Better than him finding me," she cried, her voice cracking. "Better than what he will do. What he will make me." She could not finish. "You are not going anywhere," Cole said. He tied his horse and walked past her into the cabin. She followed him, wringing her hands. You cannot fight him for me. He is my husband. He has the law." Cole turned, his face hard. "There ain't much law out here. Lily and what there is for sale. He bought it. That does not make it right." He threw his saddlebags on the table. "This is my land. He ain't welcome on it, and you're under my roof. That is all the law that matters here." He had, without meaning to, declared himself. The words hung in the air between them. He had drawn a line in the dirt and put himself on her side of it. A new kind of life began. The fear was a constant presence, a sharp tang in the air, but beneath it, something else was growing. Lily, it turned out, could not be idle. With the immediate threat now named, she seemed to draw strength from it. She discovered his books. There were only 5, kept on a small plank shelf above his cot. A worn Bible, a copy of Shakespeare's tragedies, a book on animal husbandry, a history of the Roman wars, and a thin volume of poetry he had taken from Elias's pack. She picked up the poetry first, her fingers tracing the worn letters. "Elias?" "My brother," Cole said. He was oiling his rifle. "Again." She sat by the fire, her legs tucked under her, and began to read. At first, she read haltingly, her voice a low murmur, stumbling over the words. He realized she had not had much schooling, but she was stubborn. She would trace a word with her finger, sound it out, and then read the line again. The cabin filled with the strange, beautiful words of men long dead. Her reading led to questions. She was no longer the silent, terrified woman he had found. She was becoming a person. "Why did you keep this one?" she asked one night, holding the poetry book. It was his. Cole said he liked words. "And you?" "I like the quiet." "Is that why you came here, to be quiet?" Cole sighted down the clean barrel of his rifle. "I came here because back east, the world would not stop screaming." He was surprised at his own words. He had never said that to anyone. She was quiet for a long time. "Then, did you kill many men in the war?" He looked at her. Her face was serious, lit by the fire. She was not asking to be cruel. She was just asking. "Aye," he said, his voice low. "Too many." "And do you still?" "Every day," he said, and the admission cost him. "It is not the ones you kill that haunt you. It is the ones you do not save." She understood. She nodded, slowly, and went back to the book. He found himself watching her, the way the firelight caught the red in her brown hair, the way she chewed her lip when she was concentrating on a difficult word. He watched her one afternoon as she stood by the window, braiding her hair. Her hands, still bruised but no longer raw, moved with a simple, practical grace. He felt a tightening in his chest, a strange, unfamiliar ache that had nothing to do with old wounds. And she watched him. She watched him chop wood, his back muscles moving under the worn flannel shirt. She watched his hands, scarred and calloused, as he fixed a hinge on the cabin door. He was strong, yes, but it was not just his strength. It was his stillness. He was a man who seemed rooted to the earth, as solid and unmoving as the mountains. She watched him when he thought she was not looking, a strange, shy curiosity in her eyes. She, who had been brutalized by a man, was beginning to see one. One night, the wind was high, a cold, mournful sound that rattled the one window. The fire was roaring. Cole had finished his meager supper and was staring into the flames. The stone of his past settled heavy in his gut. He reached for the bottle of whiskey he kept for medicine and cold nights. He poured 2 fingers into his tin cup. "May I?" He looked up. Lily was watching him, her eyes on the bottle. He hesitated. "It is strong." "I am cold," she said, "inside." He understood. He rinsed his other cup, poured a small measure for her, and handed it to her. She took it, her fingers brushing his. The casual touch sent a jolt through him, sharp and hot. She did not flinch. She took the cup and sniffed it. She coughed at the fumes. "Go slow," he advised. She took a tiny sip. Her eyes watered, and she gasped. It is like fire." She took another, larger sip. A small flush rose in her cheeks. She looked almost peaceful. A small, shy smile touched her lips. "My PA," she said. "He used to play the fiddle. On nights like this, he would drink. Too much. But before he got mean, he would play. He would make my ma. He would make her dance." Cole just nodded, sipping his own drink. Lily looked at the small, clear space on the cabin floor. She looked at Cole. The whiskey had made her bold. I do not know how to dance." "Not much call for it out here." Cole said, "Will you?" She looked down, her courage failing. This is foolish." "What?" She looked up, her eyes bright. "Will you dance with me, Cole? Just once. Right here. There is no music. But I want to know what it is like. To just dance." Cole stared at her. He had not danced since before the swore. He was a clumsy, heavy man, built for work and fighting, not for grace. "Lily, I am not." "Please," she whispered. "Just once." He looked at her, at the plea in her eyes. It was the first thing she had asked for that was not for survival. It was for her. He sighed. He set his cup down. He stood up. "I do not know the steps." I do not think it matters." She stood, setting her own cup down. He walked to her. He put one hand, awkwardly, on her waist. She put her hand on his shoulder. He took her other hand. His was huge and rough, swallowing hers. They stood there for a moment, frozen. "Well," he grumbled, "we just move." He began to shuffle, a slow, clumsy circle on the floorboards. She stumbled, trying to follow. He was stiff, she was nervous. And then she laughed. It was not a giggle. It was a real, true laugh, bubbling up from her chest. You are a terrible dancer, Cole." A slow smile cracked his own face. He had not smiled he could not remember. "I told you." "So am I," she laughed. They relaxed. They stopped trying to dance and just moved. A slow, swaying shuffle in the warm cabin. The only sound the wind outside and the scuff of their boots. He held her a little closer. She leaned her head, just for a second, against his chest. He could smell the clean, faint scent of wood smoke in her hair. He was intensely aware of her body, the small, warm shape of her in his arms. The swaying slowed. They stopped, but they did not move apart. They were standing in the middle of the floor, his hand on her waist, hers on his shoulder. He looked down at her. Her eyes were wide, her lips parted, the flush from the whiskey still on her cheeks. She was beautiful. The thought hit him like a physical blow. He had not thought of a woman as beautiful in a decade. He leaned in. He did not know he was doing it. His body was moving on its own. She rose on her toes, her eyes fluttering shut. Their lips were a breath apart. He could feel her exhale, warm and sweet with whiskey. And then she gasped, her eyes flying open. She pulled back, her hands flying to her mouth. I cannot. I am sorry. I should not have." She was terrified. He saw it instantly. The terror from the train, from her husband. It had all come rushing back. He had crossed a line. He stepped back immediately, raising his hands, palms out, just as he had that first day. "No, it is all right, Lily. It is all right. I am sorry. I did not mean—" "It was me," she whispered, her voice trembling. I am tired." She fled to the cot, climbing under the blankets, turning her back to him. Cole stood in the middle of the room, his heart hammering. He felt like a fool, a brute. He had pushed her. He had scared her. He grabbed his bedroll and his coat. I am going to check the horse." He fled the cabin, going to the lean-to, needing the cold air, the simple, uncomplicated presence of the animal. He did not go back inside for a long time. When he did, the cabin was dark, save for the embers in the stove. Lily was a still lump under the blankets on the cot. He spread his bedroll on the floor, as far from her as possible, his back to her. He lay down, his clothes on, his mind a turmoil of anger and a strange, sharp, and unwelcome longing. He did not know how long he had been asleep. An hour, maybe 2. A sound woke him, a shifting. He tensed, his hand going for the knife he kept beside him. "Cole?" It was her whisper, a thread of sound in the dark. He turned his head. She was standing over him, a small shadow against the faint red glow of the stove. She was wrapped in a blanket. "What is it?" he said, his voice thick with sleep. "Is it the dreams?" "Yes," she whispered. "And I am so cold." He sat up. "I will build up the fire." "No," she said, a note of panic in her voice. "No, please, I do not want to be alone. Not in my own head." She was trembling. He could see it, even in the dark. "Cole," she whispered, and the word was a plea. "Please, can I just stay here by you?" He looked at her. He looked at his narrow bedroll. He thought of the dance. He thought of her terror. I will not, she stammered. "Please, just hold me. Nothing else. I just need to not be alone." "Just hold me. Nothing else." He understood. This was not about what he wanted. It was about what she needed. She needed to feel safe. She needed to know that a man could hold her and want nothing. He lifted the edge of his blanket. "Get in." She hesitated, then quickly slipped into the bedroll. She was fully dressed in his shirt and trousers. She lay on her side, her back to him, curling into a tight ball. She was shaking as if with a fever. Cole lay down behind her. He waited. Then, slowly, he put his arm over her, around her waist. She flinched, hard, a full body spasm. "It is just me," he said, his voice low. "It is just Cole. You are safe. I am here." He did not move his arm. He just held her. He was a wall of warmth behind her. He felt her trembling begin to ease. Slowly, inch by inch, she uncurled. She let out a long, shuddering sigh, as if she had been holding her breath for weeks. She pressed back against him, just slightly, seeking his warmth, his solidity. He held her. He did not move. He listened to her breathing deepen, become more even. He smelled the smoke in her hair. He held her as he would have held a frightened animal, or a grieving brother. It was a comfort given, with no thought of taking. And in the dark, with this small, trembling woman pressed against him, he felt a crack in the cold stone he carried in his chest. He felt needed. He held her like that all night. And for the first time in 10 years, Cole slept without dreaming of the war. He had to go to town. The confrontation he'd had with Silas, and the one he'd had with Lily, had only confirmed the need. He was low on ammunition. He was low on lead and powder. If a fight was coming, he would not be caught unprepared. He left Lily with the rifle. "You know how to use it," he'd said. "I know how to load it," she'd countered, her face grim. "I do not know how to hit anything." "Point it. Pull the trigger. Do not hesitate." He rode out, the weight of her fear a physical thing on his shoulders. He avoided the general store. He went to the saloon. It was the only other place to buy what he needed, and it was where he would hear the talk. The room was thick with smoke and the smell of stale beer. Even in the middle of the afternoon, he saw them immediately. In the corner, at a table, sat the well-dressed man. He was older than Cole, maybe 45, with a soft face and mean, narrow eyes. With him were the 2 hard men, thugs by any other name, and they were not alone. 3 local men, Ranch hands Cole recognized were at the table with them, laughing too loudly, drinking the man's whiskey. The man Harding was talking. His voice was loud, carrying across the room. "Tell you, the girl's worthless. Not worth the powder to blow her to. Well, but she is my property. And she stole from me. A family heirloom. When I find her—" He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, ugly tone. But Cole could still hear the words. He described, in coarse detail, what he would do to her. He called her a whore. He called her worse. Cole felt the blood rush to his head, a hot, white rage. He turned, meaning to buy his powder and leave. He would not start this here. "Hey," one of the local ranch hands called out, spotting him. "It's the Hillman. Come to join the party. Cole?" Cole ignored him, walking to the bar. "I hear you live out north," Harding called, his voice slick. "You ain't seen a stray piece of baggage out that way, have you? Pale, stupid-looking girl?" Cole set his coins on the bar. "A box of rifle cartridges, 45.70, and a pound of powder." "Too good for us, Hillman," the ranch hand sneered, getting up. He was drunk. He swaggered over. "The mister asked you a question." "I heard him," Cole said, not turning. "Well, you see his runaway property." The man spat the word. "I ain't seen anything." Harding laughed. A high, thin sound. "He's probably right. A whore like that, she'd freeze to death. Or some Indian would find her. Good riddance." Cole's hand clenched on the bar. He took his cartridges, sliding them into his pocket. He turned to leave. "Shame, though," the drunk ranch hand said, blocking his path. "I'd have liked a taste of that myself. A man pays for something. He ought to at least let his friends—" Cole did not think, he did not plan. He just moved. His fist, hard as a hammer from years of swinging an axe, connected with the man's mouth. There was a wet crack, and the man went down. The saloon exploded. The other two local men were on him. One grabbed him from behind. The other threw a punch. Cole took it on the jaw, the force snapping his head back. He slammed his elbow back into the ribs of the man holding him, breaking the grip. He turned and drove his fist into the second man's stomach. One of Harding's hired men pulled a pistol. The bartender yelled, "No guns!" The man snarled and brought the pistol down, not to shoot, but to club. Cole raised his arm, the barrel glancing off his forearm, a sharp, searing pain. Cole grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it, and threw him over the bar into a crash of glass. The last man, the second hired thug, came at him with a knife. Cole kicked a chair into his legs. The man stumbled. Cole hit him twice, hard, once in the gut, once in the face. The man fell and did not get up. The saloon was suddenly, utterly silent. Cole stood, breathing hard, his chest heaving. His lip was split, and he could taste his own blood. His knuckles were raw and bleeding. He looked at the corner table. The local men were groaning. The hired men were down. And Harding was cowering, his chair tipped back against the wall, his face the color of spoiled milk. Cole walked toward him. He picked up the man's half-empty whiskey glass. He leaned in, his voice a low, dangerous rasp. "She is not your property," he said. He poured the whiskey into the man's lap. "You stay away from her. You hear me? Stay away." Cole turned and walked out of the saloon. He got on Boulder and rode, the adrenaline turning to a cold ache in his body. He had not just started a fight. He had started a war. He saw her as he rode into the clearing. She was standing on the cabin's small porch, the rifle in her hands. She had been waiting. She saw him, saw the way he slumped in the saddle, saw the blood on his face before he was even halfway across the yard. She did not run to him. She waited, her face tight with terror, until he stopped the horse. "Cole?" She whispered. You are bleeding." He swung down from the horse, his body aching. He was not a young man anymore. "What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Was it him?" She reached up, her hand fluttering, to touch the cut on his lip. He grabbed her wrist. His hand was rough, his knuckles bloody. His eyes were still wild from the fight, from the rage. He was not the quiet, still man she knew. He was someone else, someone dangerous. "He was in town," Cole rasped. "In the saloon, talking about you." "What? What did you do?" she whispered, her eyes wide, staring at the blood on his skin. "Defended your name," he said, his voice raw. She just stared at him. She looked at his split lip, his bruised face, his bloody hands. This man, this quiet man, who had fled the world, had just taken on the world for her. He had taken on its violence. For her, the fear, the gratitude, the whiskey boldness, the weeks of watching him, the night of being held by him, it all crested. Before he could move, before he could think, she stood on her toes, her free hand coming up to cup his bloody, bearded jaw, and she pressed her mouth to his. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate and raw. She tasted the iron of his own blood, sharp and metallic. His beard stubble scraped her skin. It was messy. It was dangerous. She could feel the fight still vibrating in him, a low, animal hum. It was perfect. It was the first kiss of her life that was not taken. It was given. It was chosen. He froze, stunned, and then, with a low groan that was half pain and half something else entirely, he kissed her back. His other hand came up, grabbing her, pulling her against him. His bloody knuckles were against her cheek. He kissed her with a hunger that matched her own, a desperate, drowning kiss. It was not gentle. It was a claiming. It was an answer. They broke apart, panting, their foreheads resting against each other. The air was cold, but they were both burning. The silence of the cabin was behind them. The violence of the town was ahead, and here, in the middle, they had found each other. "The war," Lily whispered, her voice shaking. It is here now." "Aye," Cole said, his voice rough, his eyes never leaving hers. "It is here." The kiss broke them open. It left them standing in the cold yard, breathing hard, the taste of blood and desperation on their tongues. The line had not just been crossed, it had been erased. The fight in the saloon had been a public declaration. The kiss had been a private one. There was no going back. Cole was the first to move. He took her by the arm, his grip firm but not rough, and pulled her inside the cabin, bolting the door behind them. He was all business, the dangerous, quiet energy of the fight still rolling off him. "He will come," Lily whispered, her back against the door, her hand still at her mouth, where the feeling of his lips lingered. "After what you did." "Aye," Cole said. He was already pacing the small room, his eyes scanning the floor, the walls, the ceiling. He was not a fool. He had bought them time, but he had also lit the fuse. He will come, and he will not come alone. "We have to run, now, tonight." "No." Cole shook his head, his mind already working. "We run now, in the dark, with you that tired. We will be caught by morning. They will track us. We need a plan. We need a place." He stopped, his gaze fixed on the rough-hewn floorboards under his cot. He knelt, running his hand over the wood. "What is it?" she asked. "This cabin," he said, tapping a board. "It is old, built on a dry-stacked stone foundation. There is a crawl space, not deep, but maybe deep enough." For the next 2 days, he worked. He did not sleep. He barely ate, with Lily standing watch by the window, the rifle in her hands. Cole tore up the floorboards beneath his cot. He worked with a quiet, frantic energy. He used his axe to cut a clean, square opening, and his knife to bevel the edges. He took the boards he had cut and fashioned a crude but effective trap door, reinforcing it with cross beams. He attached leather straps underneath, so it could be pulled shut from below. He hinged it with old saddle leather. When he was done, he laid his cot back over it. The bed, with its blankets, perfectly concealed the square outline. "If they come," he instructed, his voice low, "you go down there. You take water, and this." He handed her his hunting knife. "You do not make a sound. You do not come out. Not for anything. Not even if you hear. Not for anything. Understand?" "Cole," she whispered, looking at the dark, spider-filled hole. It looked like a grave. "What about you?" "I will be here," he said, his face grim. "I will be mending my tack. I will be alone, like always." The words chilled her. He was planning to face them. He was building her a hole to hide in, while he stood in the open. They did not have to wait long. It was 3 days after the saloon fight, a cold, bright morning. Lily was by the window, kneading a small lump of dough, when she froze. "Riders," she breathed. Cole, who had been cleaning his pistol at the table, was on his feet in an instant. He moved to the window, peering out from the edge. 2 men, not Harding, not his hired thugs. One man wore a tin star, the sheriff. With him was a deputy. "Not them," Cole said. "But it is trouble all the same. Get in, now." "But it is the law." "It is the law he bought," Cole said, his voice hard. "Get in, Lily, now." She did not argue. She scrambled to the cot, threw back the blankets, and lifted the heavy door. She looked back at him, her eyes wide with fear. "Be safe," she whispered. "Just be quiet," he said. He watched her slip into the darkness, her pale face the last thing he saw before she pulled the door shut. He heard the faint scrape as she settled it into place. He laid the blankets back over it, smoothing them, and sat down at the table, picking up his pistol and a cleaning rag. A heavy knock echoed through the cabin. Cole took a slow breath. He walked to the door and opened it. The sheriff, a man named Brody, was big, with a drooping mustache and tired eyes. "Cole." "Sheriff," Cole nodded, blocking the doorway. "What brings you out?" "Just checking the territories," Brody said, his eyes scanning the clearing. "You were in town a few days ago. Caused a bit of a disturbance." "Man insulted me," Cole said flatly. "I corrected him." "You corrected him and 2 of his friends, and 2 men paid by Mr. Harding. You are lucky you are not in a cell, or worse." Brody's gaze was sharp. "This man, Harding, he has put up a lot of money. Cole, a reward." "For what?" "His wife says she ran off, stole from him, says she is not well in the head." "Sounds like his trouble, not mine." Cole leaned against the doorframe, his body casual, but his hand was near the pistol on his belt. "He says he seems to think that someone might be helping her," Brody said, his eyes drifting past Cole, into the cabin. "A small cabin like this. Awful small for 2. "It is," Cole agreed, "which is why I live alone." From below the floor, Lily held her breath. She was crouched on the cold, hard-packed dirt. Dust filtered down, making her want to sneeze. She could hear their voices, muffled but clear. She pressed her hand over her mouth, her heart hammering so hard she was sure they could hear it. "I mind if I come in, warm my hands?" the sheriff asked. "Fire's low," Cole said. "And I am busy." It was a clear refusal. Brody's eyes narrowed. He looked at Cole, at the unyielding set of his jaw. He looked at the cabin, small, isolated, and now, suddenly, suspicious. "Harding is offering $500. Cole," the sheriff said quietly. "For her return. That is a lot of money." Enough to make a man look awful hard. I have got cattle to find. Sheriff, unless you are arresting me, I have got work. Brody stared at him for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. All right, Cole, have it your way. But you see anything at all, you let me know. Aye, Cole said. He watched the sheriff and his deputy mount up. He watched them ride out of the clearing. He waited until they were completely gone. Another full 5 minutes. Then he bolted the door and moved to the cot. They are gone. The trapdoor lifted. Lily emerged, covered in cobwebs, her face pale with dust and terror. She was shaking. He knows, she stammered, scrambling out. He knows I am here. He suspects, Cole corrected, his voice grim. He does not know, but he will be back. She sank onto the chair, her body trembling. $500. It was a fortune. It was enough to buy a dozen men like the sheriff. He will find me. They will tear this place apart. Not if we are not here, Cole said. She looked up, her eyes wide. Run? Montana, he said. It is new territory, fewer laws, fewer questions. We can get a fresh start, new names. Montana, she whispered. The words sounded like a prayer. A new life. It will be hard. The ride is long. We will need to pack light. Leave tonight after dark. She nodded, a desperate, sudden hope in her eyes. Yes, tonight, we will. Oh, God. Her face crumpled. She put her head in her hands, and a sob, a dry, tearing sound, ripped out of her. Lily? Cole moved toward her, his mind still on maps and horses. What is it? It is a good plan. It is not. She looked up at him, her face a mask of such utter, profound terror that it stopped him cold. It was a terror deeper than her fear of Harding, deeper than her fear of the sheriff. What? He demanded. He cannot find me. Cole, he cannot. He will not. You do not understand, she cried, her voice breaking. It is not just me. She stood up, her hands pressed against her stomach, a gesture so strange, so protective, that it took Cole a moment to understand. Lily, he breathed, the question dawning in his mind. I am pregnant, she whispered, and the tears she had held back finally came, streaming down her face. I found out on the train, just before he pushed me out. The words hit Cole like a physical blow. A child. He does not know, she sobbed. I was too scared to tell him. He had forced me just once, weeks before. He was drunk. I did not think. And then on the train, I was so sick, and I knew. She gripped his shirt, her knuckles white. You see why I cannot go back. You see what he will do. He will say it is his. He will take it. Or he will. She could not say it. The alternative was too horrible. He will hate it. Cole, she wept. He will hate it because it is part of me. He will treat it like he treated me. He will, or he will kill it. Cole's mind, which had been spinning with logistics, went completely still. He looked at her hands, pressed against her belly. He looked at her face, wrecked with a mother's terror. He thought of the words Harding had used in the saloon. Property, whore, worthless. He put his hands over hers, his large, calloused hands completely covering them. He pressed them gently against her. No, he said, his voice a low, iron vow. He will not touch you, and he will not touch this child. He looked her square in the eye. I told you, he does not own you, and no child of yours will be treated like property. I swear it. The vow sealed the last space between them. He was not just her protector. He was, in that moment, the father of the life she carried. He had claimed them both. They began to prepare. The plan to leave for Montana was no longer a desperate hope. It was a burning necessity. They moved with a quiet, shared purpose. Cole packed dried meat, ammunition, and his small store of money. Lily packed flour, salt, and the medical supplies he kept. They were a team. They were a family. The sheriff returned 2 days later. They were not expecting him. It was dusk. Cole was in the lean-to, checking Boulder's shoes for the hard ride north. Lily was inside, packing the last of the food into saddlebags. She heard the hoofbeats first. She ran to the door, her heart in her throat. "Cole, someone is—" But he was already moving, running from the stable. "Brody!" he hissed, seeing the single rider. "He is alone. Get in the hole." "There is no time." "Go!" He shoved her toward the cabin. "I will slow him." He met the sheriff in the middle of the yard. "Back again. Sheriff, I am getting tired of the company." Brody did not dismount. He did not look at Cole. His eyes were scanning the clearing, sharp and suspicious. Just had a thought. "Cole, where did you find her?" "Find who?" "Harding's wife, the runaway." Brody's voice was flat. "Do not play dumb with me. I was a tracker for the army. I saw the tracks you left after the saloon fight. You were riding heavy, like a man in a hurry, but not alone, like a man carrying something. Or someone." Cole's hand drifted to his pistol. "You are guessing." "Am I?" Brody's eyes landed on something behind the cabin, near the woodpile. He swung down from his horse. "What are you doing?" Cole said, moving to block him. Brody pushed past him. "Just looking." He walked to the woodpile, and there, half buried in the mud and melting snow, was a scrap of dark, heavy wool. Lily, watching from the cracked-open cabin door, felt her blood turn to ice. Cole saw it at the same time. It was a piece of his own coat, the coat he had wrapped her in. It must have snagged on a branch when he carried her, torn a piece, and been lost in the storm, only to be revealed by the melt. Brody knelt. He picked up the heavy, frozen scrap of wool. He looked at it. He looked at Cole, who was wearing a worn denim jacket. This is from a good coat," Brody said. "A heavy one, like the one you used to wear. The one you were not wearing in town." He stood up, the scrap of wool in his hand. A man finds a half-naked woman in a blizzard. He would give her his coat, would not he? A woman like the one Harding is looking for. He looked at Cole. The jig was up. The suspicion was now a certainty. "She is in there, ain't she?" Brody said, jerking his chin at the cabin. "You are on my land, Brody," Cole said, his voice deadly quiet. "You have no warrant. You have no right." "I have 500 reasons," Brody said, his hand dropping to his own gun. "Cole, do not be a fool. Give her up. It is not your fight." "You are wrong, Sheriff," Cole said, and he drew his pistol. "It is." Brody looked at the gun. He looked at Cole's face, hard as iron. He looked at the cabin. He was alone. This is a mistake, Cole," Brody said, slowly raising his hands. "He will bring men. He will burn you out. Get on your horse." Cole said, "And you tell Harding. You tell him he is not welcome here. You tell him he comes. I will plant him." Brody backed away, mounted his horse and rode out, his back stiff. Cole watched him go, his pistol heavy in his hand. He knew, with a terrible, sinking certainty, that they had waited too long. They would not be leaving tonight. He went inside. Lily was standing in the middle of the room, her face ashen. "He knows," she whispered. "Aye," Cole said. He bolted the door. He walked to the window and looked out at the darkening woods. They will come. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. But they will come. He turned to her. The cabin was filled with a terrible, heavy silence. The silence of the condemned. All their plans, their hopes for Montana. All of it gone. She looked at him. He looked at her. He was all she had. He was the only man who had ever shown her kindness, the only man who had ever protected her. He had fought for her. He had built her a hiding place. He had promised to protect her child. And now, he was going to die for her. The thought was unbearable. She walked to him, slowly, until she was standing in front of him. He was still looking out the window, his profile grim. "Cole," she said. He turned, his gray eyes shadowed with a deep, weary sadness. She did not say anything. She just reached up. She put her hands on his chest, feeling the steady, solid beat of his heart. He was so alive, so real. "Lily," he started, his voice rough. "We need to—" "I know," she whispered. "I know." She looked up at him, and in her eyes, he saw not fear, but a deep, profound, and aching love. She had seen the very best of him, and she was, in this last moment, not afraid. She stood on her toes. She kissed him. This time, it was not the desperate, bloody kiss from the yard. It was slow. It was tender. It was a thank you. It was a goodbye. He responded, his hands coming up to cup her face, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. He kissed her as if she were something precious, something holy. I never, she whispered against his lips. "I never wanted anyone to touch me. I thought that part of me was frozen, dead." "It is not," he said, his voice thick. "Because of you," she said. You did not just cover me. You made me warm." He lifted her then. His strong arm scooped her up as easily as he had that first day. But this time, it was not a rescue. It was an embrace. He carried her to the cot, his cot. He laid her down gently. The trapdoor was beneath them, the escape route they would never use. He stood over her, looking at her, his heart aching. "Lily, are you sure?" She looked up at him. She was a woman who had been owned, brutalized, and thrown away. But in this cabin, with this man, she was free, and this would be her choice, her first true choice. She reached up her hand. "Just be gentle, Cole," she whispered, a tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. I am still scared." He lay down beside her, his large body a comfort, not a threat. "I will not hurt you," he promised. "I will never, never hurt you." He did not take her. He did not possess her. He loved her. It was slow. It was tender. He undressed her with hands that trembled, hands that had only known war and hard labor. He touched her bruises, the faint stretch marks on her hips, with a reverence that made her want to weep. And when he finally came inside her, it was not a violation, it was a healing, it was a joining, it was a quiet, desperate, and beautiful moment of joy in a world that had only ever shown them cruelty. It was a promise, sealed in the flesh, that they were one. Afterward, she lay in his arms, her head on his chest, and she sobbed. She wept for the woman she had been. She wept for the pain. She wept for the fear. I never thought," she cried, her voice muffled against his skin. "I never thought I would want anyone to touch me ever again. I thought I was dirty, broken." Cole held her, his arms wrapped tight around her. He stroked her hair. He did not speak. He just let her cry. He let her pour out all the pain and the poison. He kissed her hair. He kissed her forehead. He kissed her tear-streaked cheeks. He kissed the ugly, faded yellow bruise on her jaw. He kissed the faint, silver scar on her shoulder, a mark from a life before she had even met him. He kissed her scars, all of them, and in the dark, quiet cabin, with the enemy gathering in the hills, he healed her. The first sound that woke him was not a sound at all. It was a light, a moving light, flickering, orange. Cole was out of the cot in an instant, pulling on his trousers, grabbing his rifle. Lily sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest. What is it?" "They are here," he said, his voice a low growl. He went to the window. The clearing was full of men, 10, maybe 12. He saw Harding, his face contorted with rage, holding a torch. He saw the sheriff, Brody, his face grim, sitting on his horse. He saw Harding's hired men, and he saw the local ranch hands he had fought in the saloon. They had all come. "Cole!" Harding's voice, high and reedy, cut through the pre-dawn dark. "Cole, you bastard! Send her out! Send out my wife!" A torch landed on the roof of the lean-to. The dry wood caught instantly. "Cole!" Lily screamed, scrambling out of the cot, pulling on his shirt. "Stay away from the window," he ordered. He smashed the glass of the window with the butt of his rifle. "I have got the law. Cole!" Brody yelled. "Harding has a warrant for theft. Do not make this a killing, man." "She is not property," Cole roared back. "She is my wife," Harding shrieked. "She is mine, and she is with my child. Send her out, or I will burn you to the ground." Lily froze. He knows? The sheriff. Cole spat, his eyes scanning the men, looking for a target. He must have guessed, or maybe. It did not matter. "This is your last chance. Cole!" Brody yelled. "Send her out!" Cole raised his rifle. He sighted on a man holding a torch near the cabin wall. "You are on my land," Cole yelled, his voice echoing in the clearing. "The law ends here. You tell that coward to come and get her." A shot rang out. A bullet thudded into the log above Cole's head. The standoff had begun. The standoff was a thing of sharp noises. The crack of Harding's pistol, the heavier boom of Cole's rifle answering from the window. Bullets thudded into the logs, sending splinters flying. Smoke, thick and acrid, was already pouring from the lean-to. The flames catching the edge of the cabin roof, the dry shingles, baked by a decade of high plains sun, were catching fast. Lily huddled by the stone hearth, the coolest part of the room, her hands over her ears. Cole was a shadow at the window, firing, ducking, reloading. He was a good shot, a calm shot, but he was one man, and they were a dozen. She watched him. He was not fighting for his land. He was not fighting for himself. He was fighting for her, for a child that was not his. He was going to die here, in this small box, choking on smoke and bleeding from a bullet, all for her. The thought was a physical pain, sharper than the cold, harder than the floor. She had been saved by him, only to become his executioner. She thought of the child inside her, this small, secret life. It would die too. It would be born in ash and smoke, or it would be taken by that man, Harding. No. The word was not spoken. It was a feeling, a hard, cold stone of certainty that settled in her belly. Next to her child, she had been pushed from a train. She had been stripped and shamed. She had hidden in the dark, in the cold, in a hole under the floor. She was done hiding. Cole grunted, ducking as a bullet shattered the last of the window frame. "Stay down. Lily, get to the trap door." "It is too late, Cole," she said. Her voice was calm. It was so calm. It startled them both. He looked back at her, his face black with soot, his eyes wide. What? He will not stop, she said, standing up. He will burn us alive. He will not stop until he has me. She walked to the cot. She did not grab a weapon. She did not grab a bag. She grabbed his coat, the big, heavy wool coat he had wrapped her in when she was a half-frozen, naked thing in the snow. She slid her arms into it. It was a suit of armor. It smelled of him, of smoke and pine and safety. "Lily, no!" he yelled, realizing what she meant to do. He reached for her. "This is my fight," she said. She put her hand on his chest, on his beating heart. You showed me how to stand. Let me." Before he could stop her, she walked to the door. She slid the heavy iron bolt back. The sound was deafeningly loud in the sudden lull of gunfire. She pulled the door open and stepped out onto the porch. The world stopped. The pre-dawn light was a sick, gray-blue, lit by the flickering orange of the burning lean-to. The ring of men, their faces ugly in the firelight, all froze. Harding, his mouth open to shout another order. Brody, the sheriff, his horse shifting uneasily. The hired thugs, their pistols raised. They all stared. She stood there, a small woman swallowed by a man's coat. The wind whipped her hair across her face. She was not the cowering, terrified creature they had been hunting. She was something else. The coat fell open. It was not a calculated move, but the wind was strong. It fell open, and in the harsh, flickering light, the slight but unmistakable swell of her belly was visible beneath the loose flannel shirt. A collective gasp. The men looked at her, then at each other. Harding saw it. His face, already contorted with rage, went purple. His mind, poisoned by pride and possession, made the leap. "You!" he shrieked, his voice cracking like a whip. "You whore!" He took a step forward, his pistol shaking in his hand. He pointed not at her, but at her stomach. That's my child! You filth! You stole my property! You stole my child!" The accusation hung in the air, thick and vile. Lily did not flinch. She had been called these names before. They had no power over her. Not anymore. She looked past Harding, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the other men, the local ranch hands, the sheriff. Her voice was not loud. It did not have to be. It cut through the cold air like a clean, sharp blade. "This child," she said, her hand resting on her belly, on the coat, "was never yours." She paused, letting the words sink in. "This child was never from you. It was never touched by you. It does not carry your poison." She looked at Harding, her eyes filled with a cold, clean fire. "It was never yours." The implication was absolute. It was a full confession. The child was not his, which meant it was Cole's. A murmur went through the crowd. The local men looked down, their feet shuffling in the snow. This was not what they signed up for. They came to repossess stolen property. They were here for a runaway wife. This was something else. This was a woman, pregnant with another man's child, standing against her husband. Sheriff Brody looked at Harding, his face a mask of sudden, deep unease. "Harding," he started, his voice low. Maybe we should take this back to town. Let the judge..." "Judge?" Harding screamed, his sanity snapping. "She is lying! She is a lying whore! And that is it is mine! Kill him!" He raised his pistol, not at Lily, but at the dark doorway behind her. Kill him and take her!" He fired. The bullet sang past Lily's ear. From the doorway, Cole's rifle roared. The shot was aimed at Harding, but one of the hired men shoved him, and the bullet went wide. The clearing exploded. The hired thugs opened fire on the cabin. Cole fired back. The local ranch hands, confused and split, hesitated. One of them, the one Cole had hit in the saloon, raised his rifle. He broke my teeth. I am getting that money. He fired. Another ranch hand grabbed his arm. Amos, no! She is pregnant! A fist fight broke out between the local men. It was chaos. Men were yelling, horses screaming. Hold your fire! Brody roared, drawing his own weapon. He spurred his horse between the fighters and the cabin. In the name of the law, I said, hold! A stray shot. It came from the side, from one of Harding's thugs. It hit Brody square in the chest. The sheriff gasped. He looked down, a look of shocked surprise on his face. He swayed, and then toppled from his horse, landing in the muddy slush. He did not move. The sheriff! Someone yelled. In that moment of shock, Cole saw Harding. The man was reloading, his eyes fixed on Lily, his face a mask of pure, murderous rage. He was going to shoot her. Cole stepped out from the doorway, raising his rifle. A clean shot. He never saw the other man, one of the hired thugs, move from the side of the burning lean-to. The man took his time. He aimed. He fired. The bullet felt like a red-hot poker slammed into Cole's left shoulder. The force spun him around. He cried out, a sharp, ragged gasp of pain. The rifle tumbling from his nerveless fingers. He staggered, clutching his shoulder, and fell back, collapsing onto the cabin floor. Cole! Lily's scream cut through the gunfire. The world, which had been in slow motion, snapped back. She ran into the cabin. He was on the floor, his back against the wall, his face pale, his eyes squeezed shut in agony. Blood was pouring from his shoulder, a dark, pulsing stain that spread across his chest. The cabin was full of smoke. The roof was catching. Embers were falling. I am hit, he gasped, his teeth gritted. We have to go, she said, her voice frantic. She grabbed him, trying to pull him up. The back, he coughed, smoke stinging his lungs. The window. She was a small woman, but her terror gave her a strength she did not know she possessed. She hauled him to his feet. He screamed as his shoulder moved, but he stayed upright, leaning on her. He was a dead weight. She half dragged, half carried him to the small, single window at the back of the cabin. He tried to help, tried to smash the glass with his good arm, but he was too weak. Lily picked up the empty rifle, his rifle, and used the stock to shatter the pane. Glass flew. Go, he ordered, his voice faint. The baby. Save the baby. Lily, leave me. She looked at him, his face gray with pain, the smoke swirling around them. She looked at the blood on his chest. I am not leaving you, she said, her voice fierce. I am not ever. Now, go. She pushed him, shoved him toward the opening. He fell through, landing hard in the slush and snow outside. She scrambled after him, cutting her hands on the glass. They were behind the cabin. The main structure was now a wall of fire, shielding them from the men in the front. The yelling, the few sporadic shots, seemed distant. The stable. Cole gasped. Boulder. The stable, a small, separate structure of logs and rough planks, was 50 yards away. Deeper into the clearing, it was their only hope. She put his good arm over her shoulder. She took his weight. Move, she commanded. Walk, Cole. Walk with me. He groaned, his feet dragging, but he tried. They stumbled, fell, got up. Every step was an agony for him. Every step was a superhuman effort for her. The fire lit their way, a roaring furnace at their backs. They reached the stable. She slid the wooden bar back and kicked the door open. It was dark inside, the air thick with the smell of hay and animal fear. Boulder stamped and whinnied in his stall. Lily eased Cole down onto a pile of clean straw. He slumped against the wall, his head rolling back. He was unconscious, or close to it. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She tore a long strip of cloth from her own chemise. From under the heavy coat, She pressed it, wadded it, against the bleeding hole in his shoulder. "Hold this," she pleaded, though she knew he could not. She had to hold it for him. She pulled his head into her lap. His skin was cold, clammy. He was bleeding. He was bleeding so much. She held him, rocking him, her tears falling onto his bloody, soot-stained face. "Do not you leave me, Cole," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Do not you dare leave me now. We are almost free. I need you. Do not you leave me." Outside, the gunfire had stopped. There was only yelling.
"They are gone,"
It was Harding's voice.
"They are not in there. The cabin it is empty."
A moment of silence. Then, "The stable! They are in the stable! I see them!" Lily's head snapped up.
"Burn it!"
Harding shrieked, his voice raw with madness.
"Burn it, too! Burn them both!"
She heard footsteps, running. The stable door burst open. It was one of the hired men, a flaming torch in his hand. He saw her, saw Cole. He grinned, his teeth yellow in the firelight. "This is from Mr. Harding," he sneered, and he tossed the torch into the driest pile of hay. The flames exploded. The dry straw went up like gunpowder. The fire raced up the walls, licking at the dry, ancient beams of the loft. "No!" Lily screamed. Boulder kicked his stall. The sound of splintering wood. The horse, mad with terror, burst free and galloped out the open door, a dark shape against the new fire. The stable was filling with smoke, black and choking. "Cole?" Lily shook him. "Cole, wake up! We have to— the fire!" He did not move. His eyes were closed. The smoke was so thick she could not breathe. She was coughing, her lungs on fire. The heat was unbearable. "I will not let you die here," she screamed, her voice raw. She grabbed him, not by his arms, but by the collar of his shirt. She planted her feet. She pulled. She screamed his name. "Cole!" She put everything she had, every bit of love, every scrap of terror, every ounce of her new, fierce strength, into one agonizing pull. He moved. His heavy, limp body scraped over the dirt floor. She pulled again. She was blind. The smoke was a solid black wall. She could only hear the roar of the fire, the crackle of the beams. She headed for the small back door, the one that led into the woods. She pulled and pulled. She was sobbing, screaming, choking. The main beam of the loft groaned. She reached the back door. She kicked it open. Cold, clean air hit her face. She fell out, into the snow, dragging him with her. Behind them, the stable roof collapsed in a geyser of sparks and flame. The clearing was lit like midday. The cabin was a bonfire. The stable was a furnace. The yard was a chaotic mess of men, silhouetted against the two blazes. No one saw them, shielded by the smoke, hidden by the burning stable. Lily dragged Cole, foot by agonizing foot, into the deep, dark shadows of the pine forest. The snow was deep here, untouched. She did not look back. She just pulled. She pulled him into the darkness, into the cold, as the world she had known burned behind her. Dawn broke over a scene of utter desolation. The cabin was a smoking, hissing pile of black logs. The stable was gone, reduced to a bed of glowing embers. Harding and his men stood in the yard, their faces gray with smoke and exhaustion. They are gone," one of the local men whispered, his face pale. We killed them." Harding stared at the ashes. His face was empty. "Yes," he said, his voice hollow. "Dead." He looked at the spot where Brody had fallen. The sheriff's body had been dragged from the fire, but he was gone. What do we do?" the man asked. Harding turned, his eyes dead. "We leave." He mounted his horse, and without another word, he rode out. His two hired men followed. The local men were left alone, standing in the cold, with the dead sheriff and the smoking ruins. Days later, the story had settled over the town like a grim fog. Harding was gone. He had claimed victory, told everyone at the saloon that his runaway wife and the hillman who had hidden her were dead, burned for their sins. He paid his men handsomely and took the eastbound stage, his face a mask of bitter, empty triumph. But the town was uneasy. The local men who had been there, they talked. They talked in whispers. In the saloon, over cheap whiskey. They told Silas, the clerk, what they had seen. They spoke of the woman, standing in the firelight, her belly swollen. They spoke of her words, "This child was never yours." They spoke of how Brody was shot. They spoke of how Harding had ordered the stable burned, with them inside. Silas rode out to the clearing a week later. The snow had begun to cover the ashes. He walked the perimeter. He found nothing. No bones, no remains. "The fire," he muttered to his horse. It was hot." But he knew. He looked at the tracks leading away from the stable, tracks that led into the dark woods, tracks that had been half covered by new snow. He went back to the ashes of the cabin. He found a piece of charred plank, all that was left of the porch. With his knife, he carved a rough cross. He jammed it into the ground, a fake marker in a field of ash. It was not a grave. It was a question, a monument to the unease. The prairie was a hard place, but it kept its secrets well. The woods were a frozen, black hell. The snow was deep, a heavy, wet blanket that grabbed at Lily's legs, soaking her to the bone. She was pulling a dead weight. Cole was unconscious, his body a leaden, awkward burden. She had him by the collar, dragging him backward, one agonizing step at a time. Her own body was screaming. Her lungs burned from the smoke. Her hands were raw and bleeding from the glass. But she did not stop. She could not stop. The roaring of the fire faded, replaced by the howl of the wind in the high pines and her own ragged, sobbing breaths. She did not know where she was going. She was just going away. She fell, her ankle twisting on a hidden root. She landed hard, Cole's body collapsing half on top of her. The pain was a white-hot flash. She lay in the snow, pinned, gasping. Cole did not move. His face was a waxy gray color in the faint moonlight. "No," she panted. "No, not here." She tried to push him off, but he was too heavy. She was trapped. She looked at his shoulder. The cloth she had stuffed into the wound was black with blood. He was so still. "Cole," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, please, Cole, wake up." He did not stir. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through her exhaustion. She was alone, in the dark, in the snow, with a dead man. And she was pregnant. "No!" she screamed, the sound small and lost in the vast, uncaring woods. She bucked, twisted, using her legs, her elbows, fueled by a fresh wave of adrenaline. She managed to squirm out from under him. She knelt beside him. She put her ear to his mouth. Nothing. She pressed her head against his chest, against the sticky, wet blood. A flutter, faint, thready, but it was there. Thump, thump, thump. He was alive. That was all she needed. She stood up, her twisted ankles screaming in protest. She ignored it. She looked around. They were in a small clearing. They needed shelter. They needed anything. She saw him then, a dark shape under a pine tree, shaking, his reins tangled in a low branch. Boulder. He had fled the fire and, by some miracle, had stopped here. "Boulder," she whispered, holding out a bloody hand. "Easy, boy, easy." The horse whinnied, his eyes white, but he did not bolt. He knew her smell, the smell of the stable, of Cole. It took her nearly an hour of agony. She had to untangle the reins, calm the horse, and then, somehow, get Cole onto its back. He was a dead weight. She tried to lift him. She failed. She tried again. She failed. Finally, weeping with frustration, she used a fallen log as a sort of ramp. She dragged Cole onto it, his body limp. Then she pulled Boulder alongside, begging, pleading with the horse to stand still. She used every last scrap of her strength. She heaved his torso over the saddle. He slumped forward, a sack of broken bones. She tied his hands together under the horse's neck with a strip of leather from the saddle. She tied his feet. She did not know where she was going. She just knew Montana was north. She took the reins, and with a final, heartbreaking look at the red glow in the sky behind them, she began to walk, leading the horse, limping into the frozen darkness. For weeks, they were ghosts. Lily walked until her ankle was a swollen, purple mass and her feet were raw. She learned to tend Cole in the wild. She found a stream and washed his wound, the icy water making him gasp and arch in a brief moment of consciousness. She tore his flannel shirt, the one he had given her, into bandages. She packed the wound with snow to stop the bleeding, a trick she had seen an old woman do once for a deep cut. She prayed. She found a hunter's lean-to, long abandoned, and they sheltered there for 3 days while a fresh blizzard raged. She kept a fire going. Cole drifted in and out of a deep fever. He would call out, not for her, but for Elias, his voice thick and broken. She would wipe his face with snow, force sips of warm water between his cracked lips, and whisper, "It is all right. Cole, I am here, I am here." She found his pistol, which he had tucked into his belt before the fight. She had the rifle, too. She was a terrible shot, but the sound was enough to scare off a pair of wolves. She found snares in his saddlebag and, remembering how he did it, managed to catch 2 rabbits. She cooked the meat over the fire, feeding him broth, then small pieces, which he chewed weakly. He finally woke, truly woke, on the 9th day, his eyes clear but impossibly weary. Found hers. He was lying in the lean-to. He saw the snow. He saw her face gaunt, her hair matted, her hands raw. "Lily," he whispered. His voice was a dry rasp. She burst into tears, a sudden, racking sob of pure relief. You are alive." He looked at his shoulder, at the crude, clean bandages. He looked at his hands, his boots. "The fire?" "Gone," she said, wiping her face. They are all gone. We are safe. Cole." He closed his eyes. He did not have the strength to say more. He just reached out his good hand, his fingers finding hers. He held on, his grip weak, and fell back asleep. They crossed the border into Montana 2 weeks later. They were not lovers. They were not even friends. They were survivors. 2 broken pieces of a life, held together by sheer, stubborn will. They found a small, rough mining camp, nestled in a high valley, a place called Hope's End. It seemed like a bitter joke. They pooled what they had, the small roll of money from his saddlebag, the gold ring from her finger. She did not hesitate. She sold it to the assayer for $20. It was the price of her shame, and she was glad to be rid of it. They rented a 1-room shack on the edge of the camp. It was smaller than Cole's cabin, the wind whistling through the cracks, but it was theirs. The first person they sought was the midwife, a hard-faced older woman named Martha. She took one look at Lily, her swollen belly, her gaunt face. She took one look at Cole, leaning on a stick, his left arm bound tight to his chest, his shoulder a knot of scarred, ruined muscle. "Husband?" Martha asked, her voice curt. Lily looked at Cole. Cole looked at her. "Yes," Lily said, her voice clear. "He your husband when he did that to you?" Martha asked, her eyes sharp. "No," Lily said, not flinching. "Another man did my first husband. He is dead." "And him?" She nodded at Cole. "He the father?" "He is," Lily said, the lie coming easily. It felt It felt like the truth. Martha nodded. All right. He looks like he needs as much help as you do. She came and unbound Cole's shoulder. She tisked at the wound. You are lucky you did not lose the arm, or your life. The ball passed clean through, but it tore the muscle. You will never have the full use of it again. She cleaned it, properly, with whiskey and salve. Cole sat, his face pale, not making a sound. Lily held his good hand. As for you, Martha said, turning to Lily, you are fragile, thin. You lost your last moon. When? Lily told her. You are tough. Martha nodded. The child, too, but you will rest. You will eat. My name is Martha. You need anything, you send him. They left the midwife's cabin and walked back to their shack. The wind was cold. We need names, Lily said, her breath fogging. Cole stopped, leaning on his stick. He looked at the hard, unforgiving mountains. Elias, he said, his voice rough. My name is Elias Turner. Lily nodded. Elias. She liked the sound of it. It felt right. And I am Sarah Turner. A new life, a new start. Mr. and Mrs. Elias Turner. Life found a routine. It was a hard, brutal routine. Cole, Elias, could not ride. He could not rope. He could not swing an axe. His shoulder was a constant, burning agony. He got a job with the freight company, not as a driver, but as a swamper. He guarded the wagons. He helped load and unload with his one good arm. It was humiliating, painful work. He would come home at night, his face gray with exhaustion and pain, his limp more pronounced. Lily, Sarah, made their shack a home. She tended a small, stubborn garden in the rocky soil, coaxing lettuce and beans to grow. She cooked, she cleaned, she mended their few clothes. She learned the camp. She talked to Martha, who taught her about herbs, about what was safe to eat. They lived as man and wife, but they were not. They slept in the same narrow bed. They needed the shared warmth. The first few weeks, they slept like brother and sister, back to back, never touching. They were both too raw, too broken. The memory of that one night in the cabin, it was a dream, a beautiful, impossible dream, from a life that had burned to the ground. But bodies heal, and so do souls, though more slowly. One night, he came home, soaked to the bone from a freezing rain. He was shaking, his teeth chattering, his bad shoulder locked in a spasm of pain. She met him at the door. She undressed him, her movements practical, not intimate. She sat him by the fire. She rubbed his good hand, trying to bring the life back to it. He was watching her. Lily, he whispered. He had not used her real name in months. She stopped. Sarah. Lily, he said again, his voice raw. He reached up, his good hand, and touched her face. His thumb stroked her cheek. I am sorry for this. For what? This life, this shack, my arm. I am not the man I was. I do not, she started. I cannot provide, he said, the shame thick in his voice. I am broken. Lily. She looked at him. This man who had fought a dozen men for her. This man who had taken a bullet for her. This man who worked until he collapsed, just to buy her flour and beans. You are not broken, she said, her voice fierce. You are here. You are mine. She leaned in and kissed him. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of gratitude, of absolute, profound belonging. He kissed her back, and that night, when they lay in the narrow bed, he did not turn his back. He pulled her close, his good arm coming around her swollen belly. He held her. She slept, for the first time in her life, with her head on her husband's chest, and he slept. holding his wife and his child. The healing was slow. They talked. Not a lot, but enough. She was hanging laundry one afternoon. The spring sun was warm. He was sitting on the porch, trying to fix a piece of harness. His movements with his left hand clumsy and frustrating. He cursed, dropping the leather. She came and sat beside him. She watched him for a moment, his jaw tight with anger. "Cole," she said, using the name that was just for them. He did not look up. Do you ever regret it?" she asked, her voice quiet. He stopped, his hand frozen on the leather. "Regret what?" "Finding me," she whispered. If you had just ridden by, if you had left me, that sack in the snow, your life, it would be, you would have your cabin, your arm, your quiet." He was still for a very long time. He looked at his hand, the scarred knuckles. He looked at his shoulder. He looked at her face soft in the sun, her belly round with the new life he had protected. He turned to her, and his gray eyes were clear and steady. "Lily," he said, his voice low, there are nights when the pain is bad, when this arm, it feels like it is on fire." She looked down, her heart aching. "But I look at you," he continued, and I feel this." He put his good hand on her belly. He felt the child kick, a small, sudden movement. "And I feel you." He met her gaze. "Not even when I bleed. Lily, do you hear me? Not ever, not even then." She leaned her head on his good shoulder, and they sat, in the quiet, as the sun went down. The baby was born on a night of chaos, a high country storm, a freak in early summer, slammed into the camp. The wind shrieked, and rain, cold as ice, turned the camp to a sea of mud. Lily's labor started fast and hard. Cole ran. He ran through the mud, his limp forgotten, to Martha's cabin. He pounded on the door. "Now!" he yelled. It is time." Martha was there in 10 minutes, her bag packed. The small shack was filled with the sound of the storm, and Lily's low, pained moans. This is not like you read about," Martha said gruffly, shoving Cole out of the way. "Getting water, boiling cloths. This is work. Now, you, Elias, you make yourself useful. Hold her hand, talk to her, or get out." Cole did not get out. He knelt by the bed. Lily was drenched in sweat, her face pale. She gripped his hand, her nails digging into his skin. It hurts! Cole!" she gasped, her eyes wide with panic. "I am here," he said, his voice rough. "I am here. Sarah, you are so strong. You are the strongest person I know. You can do this." I am scared," she wept. "So am I," he admitted, and he kissed her knuckles. "But we are together." It was a long night. He stayed by her. He wiped her face. He gave her sips of water. He let her break his hand with her grip. He watched, in awe, as this small, fragile woman did the hardest work in the world. He saw her pain, her terror, and her absolute, iron-willed strength. He had thought he saved her. He realized, in that moment, he was not fit to even stand in the same room. "One more, girl," Martha commanded. "Now!" Lily screamed, a raw, tearing sound that was not pain, but effort. And then, a new sound, a thin, sputtering wail, cutting through the noise of the storm. It is a girl," Martha said, a rare smile on her hard face. She cleaned the baby, wrapped her. "A small thing, but she is a fighter, like her ma." She laid the baby in Lily's arms. Lily was crying, but these were not tears of pain. She looked at the small, red, wrinkled face. She looked at the tiny, perfect hands. She touched the soft, dark hair. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, Cole." Cole moved, his bad shoulder bumping the wall. He looked at the child, and his heart. It broke open. The stone he had carried for Elias, the guilt, the war, it all just dissolved. She is perfect," he whispered. "What do we call her?" Lily asked, her eyes never leaving the baby's face. Cole thought. He thought of the town, Hope's End. He thought of their journey. He thought of this new impossible life. "Hope," Lily said, as if reading his mind. "Her name is Hope." They heard the news a month later. A traveling merchant, a man who sold pots and pans, was in camp. Cole was buying a small, cast-iron skillet, a luxury. "Tough country, this," the merchant said, bagging the skillet. "But not so tough as Wyoming. Heard a terrible story. A man, a rich fella from back east. He was found in the hills." Cole's hand, counting out the coins, paused. "Aye," the merchant said, warming to his story. "Name of Harding. Seems he went looking for his runaway wife. Went and got the sheriff killed. Burned a man's cabin to the ground. Thought the wife and her lover were in it, but they were not." "Oh," Cole said, his voice flat. "Nope, they vanished. But this Harding, he did not. He was found, maybe 2 weeks after, in a gully. His throat was cut, scalped, too. Some say it was the Indians. Angry he was on their land. Some say it was those local boys, the ones who were with him, angry about the sheriff, angry about everything. No one knows, no one much cared. Neither, they just buried him." Cole slid the coins across the counter. "War. It makes men hard." "That it does, friend," the merchant said. "That it does." Cole walked home. Lily was on the porch, nursing Hope. She looked up, her face soft and peaceful. He told her the story, flat, without emotion. She listened. She did not look shocked. She did not look relieved. She just listened. When he was done, she nodded. Once, she looked down at the baby in her arms. It is over," she said. "Aye," Cole said, "it is over." They did not speak of it again. That night, after the baby was asleep, Cole built up the fire in the small stove. It was a warm night, but he built it high. Lily watched him. She knew what he was going to do. She went to the old wooden trunk at the foot of their bed. She opened it. At the very bottom, folded, was his coat. Her coat. She had washed it. She had scrubbed the blood and the mud from it. She had mended the tears. She had kept it. It was her first home. She took it out. She held it to her face, breathing in the smell of him, of smoke, of survival. She walked to the stove and handed it to him. He took it. Their hands brushed. He looked at her. She nodded. He opened the stove door. The firelight lit his face. His scarred, quiet, beautiful face. He held the coat for a moment. Then he fed it to the flames. They watched it burn. They watched the heavy wool char, curl and turn to ash. The smell was thick in the small room. It was the smell of the past, the smell of shame and fear and running, and when it was done, Cole closed the stove door. The cabin was quiet, save for the soft breathing of their daughter. Its purpose was served. The next evening, the wind was high. It was a clean wind, a Montana wind, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of a long, clear summer. Lily walked. She walked up the small hill behind their shack. The baby, Hope, wrapped in a blanket and held tight to her chest. She stood at the top, looking out. The valley was spread below her. A rough, hard, beautiful land. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of purple and deep, bloody orange. She heard him come up behind her. He did not make much sound, but she could feel him. She always knew where he was. Cole, Elias, her husband. He came to stand behind her. He did not touch her, just stood. His solidity a comfort. He was looking at the same sunset. It is beautiful, she whispered. Aye, he said. He put his arms around her. Not his one good arm, both. His left arm, scarred and stiff, but strong enough. He wrapped his arms around her waist, his hands resting on her stomach, just below the baby she held. He pulled her back against his chest. She leaned her head back against his good shoulder. His beard, trimmed now, was soft against her temple. They stood, a family, watching the world end its day. She thought of the woman in the snow, the naked, frozen, shamed thing. She thought of the coat, the first layer. She turned her head, her lips brushing his neck. Cole, she whispered. You did not just cover me, she said, her voice thick with tears. But they were not sad. That day, in the snow, you did more. She pressed her head against him, breathing him in. You gave me back my skin. He tightened his grip. He pressed his lips to her hair. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The wind howled. It tore at the hillside, a wild, free, and lonesome sound. But it could not touch them. They stood together, no longer broken. They were whole. Thank you for listening. Please comment where you are listening from to connect with others. Subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in English.